Welcome back. So we just spent some time in the Middle East yesterday. So now we actually have a special video because I'm going to share a few stories about a vacation that I took this year. So at the end of January 2020, I decided to go on a cruise for the first time just by myself. It was a week long from New Orleans to Cozumel, Mexico to Grand Cayman, all the way over to Jamaica, and then all the way back to New Orleans. Now, I have quite a few pretty funny stories, mostly from Jamaica, but I'm just going to cover everything in chronological order. So first off, the New Orleans port is in kind of a weird place. So right here, it's in a pretty ugly spot, to be honest. It's like all industrial, like warehouses and factories. It's pretty dirty. But then you get on the ship, and then it actually has to turn all the way around and then go all the way out the river. All the way out the Mississippi River. And I was kind of surprised because this is a long river. It actually takes, I don't know, like a good 6 or 7 hours just to get away from Louisiana. But then you make it out onto the water, and then you spend an entire day just over the Gulf of Mexico. So our first stop over here in Cozumel, it's just a tiny little island right off of the mainland of Mexico. And so you've basically just got one main city here. There is like a road, there are like a bunch of tiny little places all around the island, but most of it is just forest, just wide open forests. So our ship arrives, and I decided to sign up for what was called the Mayan Ruins tour. And so we got here, hopped in a bus, drove through the whole city, down the one highway, and then headed all the way up to San Gervasio. And luckily there is some street view around here. So I really like the area, how it's very like rainforesty, like very humid, very different from what I'm used to living in. But let's just jump into the actual Mayan ruins because luckily we've got some real street view here. So of course they're showing us a tour around here. And funny enough, I actually found a house cat just wandering around here. It looked kind of similar to Faye, and I was just petting the little cat and playing with him, and then he decided to scratch me and ran away. And then I also got about 15 mosquito bites all over my legs, and so that definitely made the trip more fun. But yeah, I would say that this was actually a pretty cool thing to get to explore. You basically just have the freedom to walk around and see everything around here. But anyway, we left the jungle and then came all the way out to the beach. Now, I know for a lot of people, like, oh, the ocean is so great. It's so awesome to see the water. But when you've been on a cruise ship all week, it's really not that exciting after a while. But we end up stopping over here at some, like, outdoor restaurant place. I'm honestly super cheap, so I wasn't going to be spending any money. I'm like, we got free food on the boat. Why would I pay for food anywhere else? And I also didn't want to get in the water, so I just kind of found a chair and sat there looking at the water for like an hour. Just with my headphones in, because I sure know how to party. But the scenery here definitely is pretty cool. And then from there, eventually hopped back in the bus and just drove all the way back to the town and got back on the boat. And yeah, most of the drive just looked like this. So keep in mind where we're at right here in case we see something like this on GeoGuessr. So anyway, we probably only spent like 6 or 7 hours on the island. And then it was off to Grand Cayman, the Cayman Islands. So the Cayman Islands, they're actually pretty small. There's these 2 tiny little islands with hardly anything on them. But the only one we stopped at was Grand Cayman. And this one doesn't actually have a pier that the ships can go up to. So they just kind of hang out here and you have to climb into... They actually use like lifeboats or just any sort of like smaller boats to tether from the main cruise to the land. And I had some extra time on this one, so I just decided to walk around the town a little bit. For those of you who've been on a cruise, you can definitely tell there are a lot of tourist traps around where you're supposed to dock. There's so many overpriced like souvenir shops, and there's also like a bunch of jewelry shops. Yeah, there's a diamond shop right there. And overall, it's just kind of hard to walk around because, I mean, there were tons of people there. There were probably like 6 or 7 different ships that had all docked there at the same time. So, I mean, the sidewalks were just so crowded. But then eventually I joined in with my tour group and, we got in a bus and headed north up the island. And then over here, you got a place called hell, Grand Cayman. So yeah, actually, we stopped over here in hell. And this is one of those moments where I'm just like, I'm standing around here on an island around the Gulf of Mexico, just by myself, like thousands of miles from anybody I know, and just thinking like, this is kind of a weird feeling just being here. Now this is in the backyard of hell. There's just like this really old building that you can walk around and go inside. And then back here, there's just like, I don't even know what you call this, a bunch of rock formations. Anyways, we made a few small stops around this place. And then we ended up in, I think, the Cayman Turtle Center. Yeah, this is definitely the place. I mean, I didn't really know what I was getting into when I signed up for the tour. I think it was just like Explore Cayman Islands, like that was the name of the tour. And then they bring you into this sort of like zoo. I don't know, you could barely call it a zoo. It's basically just a place with turtles. And so there's like 15 different exhibits, all with just turtles in them. But that was basically the main portion of all I did on the island. Because then we drove back to the ports, and then I got back on the ship, and then it was off to Jamaica. Now there's not a whole lot of street view on Jamaica, surprisingly, but I can still point to exactly where we were. So we actually came over here to Ocho Rios, and there's the cruise terminal right there. Now I just gotta say, either Jamaica lives up to every stereotype I've ever heard about them, or they like to cater to the tourists that believe in every stereotype about Jamaica. Now, what do I mean by that? Okay, so the ship comes up, we dock right here, and then you just walk down here, and then this is where you meet up with whatever tour group you go on. And I just happened to get off the ship early. You know, usually you have to wait in a super long line just to get off the ship because you got thousands of people all getting off at once. And so I wanted to get off early just to make sure that I wasn't late. And so I had like 45 minutes, and so I'm like, okay, cool. So I'll just walk past the cruise port, you know, past the gate where you gotta like show your passport, and just walk around and see what I can find. And I'll say right now, I did not make it very far. So just walking out the parking lot, there's little gift shop stands just all around the parking lot, just lining the edges of it. And I'm just trying to walk straight through the parking lot just to get past it. And just every single salesperson around is just like, hey, come over here. I want to show you something. Or I want to talk to you. Like, that's how they draw you in. You know, they know the tourists. They know how to drag them in. And so it's always just, hey, my friend, come here. I just want to talk to you. And it can definitely be kind of difficult. But sometimes you just got to be like, no, sorry, I'm not interested. But anyway, I somehow made it past the parking lot and got out to about right here. I mean, like I said, I was one of the first people off the ship, and so there was kind of just like a big gathering of like taxi drivers and tour bus drivers and just tons of people trying to sell stuff. They were all just like gathered around, and they saw me coming, and I'll be honest, it was a little sketchy because a bunch of guys started just walking up to me. And this guy comes up to me, and he's like, hey, so you want some weed? And I'm like, no, that's okay. He's like, hey, don't worry, I'm not a cop. I'm like, yeah, no, that's okay, I don't smoke. He's like, hey, don't worry about it, man. It's legal here. I'm like, yeah, I get that. That's fine, but I'm just not interested. And so I figured out pretty early on that I was not going to make it very far without being harassed by salespeople. So I just walked right back, ignored all the people yelling at me through the whole parking lot, and just waited for the tour to start. Anyway, once I finally got to the group and we hopped in the bus, it wasn't so bad. The area is actually pretty cool. I wish there was a lot of street view. So anyway, we're cruising down the highway in the bus. And of course the tour guide's trying to keep it interesting, talking to the group. Like, remember I was just saying every Jamaican stereotype is apparently true? Because they're just talking nonstop about Bob Marley. They start playing Bob Marley over the radio. They're teaching us all this Jamaican slang. And of course, they already tried to sell me weed. But anyway, we go along the highway pretty far. It was like an hour and a half. Until we get to the Green Grotto Caves. Now, I don't think there's a whole lot of pictures of this place, but this is pretty much what it looked like. I mean, you're exploring underground caves. I mean, you're with the whole group and everything, so it's not like you just wander off. But yeah, it was a pretty fun little tour over here. You know, it's not very often you just get to go look and see what's underground, and then also come out and see the jungle outside too. But then once we finished up there, we drove back to the town. But we weren't quite done yet. So we stop in this little plaza over here. And there's just a whole bunch of shops just all around. And like I said, they're always trying to sell you Bob Marley merch. Everything to do with the Jamaican flag. and just the whole green, red, and yellow everything. And I mean, I swear, I saw like 50 different souvenir shops that looked exactly the same. Like, they had all of the same stuff. But anyway, here's the best part. This was the best story from the whole trip. So it was actually right here around the plaza. So I'm just wandering around, walking through the shops, because I'm like, well, you know, we're stuck here for like 30 minutes. I might as well look around. And there's this one lady there that's just like, oh, hey, I like your hair. You should let me braid it. I'm like, no, that's okay. I'm not interested. And she's like, don't you want to know how much it costs? I'm like, no, not really. And so, like, I just keep walking, and she's, like, following behind me. So I'm just walking this way, and this guy walks out of his shop, and he's like, hey, why don't you come in here and take a look at some things I have? I'm like, no, that's okay. So I'm, like, trying to run away. I walk around the corner, and both of them are following me. And the lady's like, it's only $2. I'm like, I don't care. And the guy's like, here, just come here. And he, like, grabs my hand. He, like, pulls me into the shop. And I'm like, oh, okay, whatever. And then he just pulls out a handful of joints. And I'm just like... Really? And he's just like, here, man, just take one for free. I'm like, nah, that's okay. I don't do that. He's like, well, what do you do to party? I'm like, I don't. He's like, all right, well, just take a look around my shop and see if there's anything you like. And I just walked right back out and sat in the bus until it was time to leave. And from there, we went back to the port, and I just went right back onto the boat and said, all right, I'm done with this place. But to be honest, Jamaica was probably my favorite place that we stopped at. If I were to spend an entire week in any one of these places, I would definitely pick Jamaica. Because there are just a lot of really cool sights to see. Like, there's these waterfalls. There's, like, swimming with the dolphins or something. We have the Dolphin Cove. There's, like, horseback riding through the water or something. And there's just a bunch of big resorts. I mean, like, definitely a lot of great scenery. Lots of cool stuff to look around. I mean, I don't really have much to say about the majority of the landscape around here. I mean, it's just very green, very rainforesty. Here's kind of one of the few street view pictures I can see. You know, just lots of really big mountains. And I definitely think it would be cool to go back here again, just to explore and go on some hikes and do stuff like that. So anyway, after that, we hopped back in the ship, and then it took 2.5 days to sail all the way back to New Orleans. Now, keep in mind, this whole trip went from January 26th to February 2nd. So this was before the virus was really a big thing. I mean, it was very talked about in the news, but it had not really reached the US much at that point. But during this entire week, I had no service whatsoever, so I couldn't look at the news. I had no idea what was going on outside of the trip, which in a way was kind of interesting, but at the same time, it got so boring. Like, the whole 2.5 days on the ship back, like, I was so bored. I spent like the majority of those last days just sitting in my cabin watching TV, and then occasionally coming out to use the buffet, and then going back and then taking a nap. However, halfway through this cruise, they had to crack down on the buffet because the virus had apparently started to spread, and they started getting really paranoid. So they basically tripled the staff in the buffet to make sure that nobody could touch anything. And it basically just made it a huge hassle to do anything on the boat anymore. And so we finally made it back to New Orleans. And I really messed up my scheduling flight because I thought that we were going to get back to the airport like late in the day, like late afternoon. So I'm like, all right, well, I'll schedule my flight for like 7 p.m. But I got to the airport at like 8 a.m. and there was nothing I could do to reschedule a flight. So I literally sat there at the airport for like 11 hours straight. Yeah, this Louis Armstrong New Orleans International Airport, I couldn't care less if I never went back there again, because I was stuck here all day. I mean, on the plus side, it was the first day I'd had any service for the whole week, so I just watched YouTube on my phone, just laying on the floor. But still, I was super ready to be home by the end of this, and finally get back and see Faye again. But that about sums up the story of my very first cruise. Who knows if I'll ever go on another one. I mean, I really decided that the only things I didn't like about the cruise was spending way too much time on the boat and being alone. So if I were to go with somebody else and go on a cruise that had a lot more ports and a lot less days at sea, then I think I would enjoy it a lot more. But I'll try and throw in a bunch of pictures from my trip. I know this video is a little bit different than what I've been doing recently, but I mean, there's a lot you can do with Google Maps, so thanks to everybody for watching.